Colleen is changing the way we talk and think about other animals. She's a recognised expert and thought leader on the culinary, social, ethical and practical aspects of living vegan. Colleen is an award-winning author of 7 books, including the best-selling The Joy of Vegan Baking, The Vegan Table, Colour Me Vegan, Vegan's Daily Companion, On Being Vegan, the 30-Day Vegan Challenge, and The Joyful Vegan. She is an acclaimed speaker and beloved host of the inspiring podcast Food for Thought, which has been voted favourite podcast by Veg News magazine readers several years in a row. And her new podcast, Etymology, is changing the way we talk about other animals. She also co-founded the Political Action Committee East Bay Animal Pack to work with government officials on animal issues in the San Francisco Bay Area. Colleen shares her message of compassion and wellness on national and regional TV and radio programs, including a monthly vegan segment on Good Morning Sacramento, and as a monthly contributor to National Public Radio KQED. She has appeared on the Food Network, CBS, PBS, and Fox. Interviews with her have been featured on NPR, Huffington Post, US News, and World Project, and her recipes have featured on Epicurious and Ofra.com. Wow. Colleen, hi, how are you?
That's just too long. Just sorry.
I think I need to live about another 200 years to have a bio like that. It's, it's so inspiring. It's unbelievable. I just want to, before we start, thank you for being on the show, and thanks for giving up your time in sunny California today to come inside and speak to us.
Many moons ago now. It's been a couple decades. Even before I knew of a word called vegan, I knew that I didn't want to hurt animals. Certainly as a child, I was someone who didn't want to hurt animals. And I think most of us don't want to hurt animals when we're children, and we're encouraged to be compassionate towards animals. We're taught to not hurt animals, right? We use that as a barometer for mental health in children. If they hurt animals, we know that's a danger sign. And if they're kind to animals, we know that's actually a really good sign. Certainly that's not how it was presented to me when I was growing up. My parents just taught me to be kind and to be good. And it was a natural instinct I had that I think most of us have that has to be honed. You know, we have to be taught not to pull the tail of an animal because it will hurt them. And we have to be taught, some things, but I really think it's our instinct. And I was that kid. I mean, I grew up in a family that they weren't, huge animal lovers. I won't say that. My sister doesn't really care for animals. I mean, so how does that happen, right? I mean, she likes them, but she's not an animal person like I am. But I often say that you don't have to love animals to not want to hurt them. And I was someone who didn't want to hurt them, but I was also someone who really loved being around them. And they were just everything. I still just love being in their presence. So, so I was that person. And when I found out that I was actually contributing to harm, my instinct was to stop doing that. So I was about 19 when I read a book called Diet for New America, which you've probably heard of. I mean, it was really one of the first books in the United States that talked about the effect of eating animals, on our health, and on the environment. And John Robbins, he's become a friend, which is, to me, it changed everything for me. It opened my eyes. And I stopped eating land animals right away, but I actually, still stayed willfully blind to some degree because I kept eating dairy and eggs. I just didn't make the connection, or it was just inconvenient, which is often the case. So I stopped eating land animals. I started becoming an advocate for animals, and in all these other ways. I started just delving into all the ways we exploit animals in terms of research laboratories, in terms of puppy mills, in terms of vegetarianism, because I wasn't even vegetarian. I was still eating aquatic animals. But, I started. And I think that's how so many people start. You just get this seed and you either run with it or you stay there for a while. I just happened to run with it. But there was still a gap of years between me being vegetarian and me being vegan. And I think it's so important to remember that gap. And it's so important for me to remember that part of my story, because I was a compassionate person. I was a compassionate person before I became vegetarian. I was a compassionate person before I became vegan. I just wasn't making the connection. And as an advocate, I think it's so important to remember that, because when I encounter all of the non-vegans I encounter, and we encounter them every day, I cannot and I will not look at them as being evil, uncaring, unkind, lacking compassion. It's just not true. It's that, and we can talk more about this because I think this is the fascinating part of it, is that they're willfully blind and they compartmentalize, as we all do, our compassion, and we compartmentalize the animals. So I did that, and I did it until I didn't. And when I didn't anymore, it was because I read a book called Slaughterhouse. And I mean, I read books in between, and I read happy books too, but I wanted to know. And I think by then, had I already read it? I don't think so. No, I think, I may have read Mad Cowboy by Howard Lyman about, his journey, but it was really Slaughterhouse that brought me to my knees. This is this part of the story we have to tell. It's not just the slaughter. Mm-hmm. It's the culture of violence that is inherent in an industry whose foundation is slaughter. I mean, it's the culture of violence, and it's what it does to the workers, and it's what it does to the animals, and it's the sadism that takes place beyond the slaughter. Not because they're necessarily all sadists. I think there are some who work in that industry. I think there are sadists who work as accountants. I mean, it doesn't have to just be, slaughterhouse workers, but it feeds that, because day in and day out, you're just killing animals, and you're desensitized to your own compassion. You're desensitized to the animal suffering. So that was the book, and that was it. And so I was actually on I was in LA, I was in a hotel, I was at a conference, or a tech conference. And I called my husband and I was like, I'm vegan. Like, I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means for you. But I was sobbing. I was absolutely sobbing. And I said, I'm vegan. And I came back home, and just everything has switched for me. Well, I always tell people when they're, trying to find their voice, is to use your voice, to start with what you have, right? So this is my personality. I mean, I can be sarcastic. I can be, I like making people laugh. I am interested in aspects. I mean, I've always been interested in language. I've always been interested in rhetoric, and I've always been interested in persuasion, right? I mean, so this happened to be the topic that I am so passionate about, but I'm passionate about other topics as well. And so I'll bring that same passion and humor and whatever I can to whatever I'm sharing. So yes, in the sense that this is my personality, and I encourage everyone to just use your personality, even if you're completely opposite of my personality, right? I mean, don't try to be something you're not. However, be yourself, but I absolutely honed how I went about saying what I said based on how people responded. Like, I would learn, right, all the time. I loved the questions. And when people would also be obnoxious or challenging, I also loved the opportunity to be better myself, to learn how to respond to that. As well. Yeah. And so that's how I, and I still learn, I still hone, I still improve, I still, work at being the most effective. I think about this stuff all the time. I see how people respond. Would I hone my message differently based on how people respond? Did I hit the mark on that one? Did I miss the mark? When I see other people doing something, I either say, oh, that's interesting, or that's horrible, and I don't want to be that, right? So yes, and I think all of us can always keep honing our message and our method. Right. I mean, we live in a non-vegan world, and so the story that I tell and the skills that I teach came from my own mistakes, right? So when I talk about being defensive and being reactive and being angry and being ineffective, it's because I was those things in the beginning. Of course. I mean, of course we do, because we're so passionate, because we care so much. And we, and so I have to reference The Joyful Vegan. So the last book you mentioned is my most recent book. And the book came out of a series of podcast episodes I did called The 10 Stages of What Happens When You Stop Eating Animals. And what I started piecing together were the stories, my own story, my own experience, but also the stories of people I had heard from, over the years that I've been doing this work, mostly through the podcast, and hearing, people's struggles and their challenges and their frustrations and their sadness and their anger. And I started identifying these threads that run through all of our stories. And I started putting a name to them, and I started identifying the stages. They're not like linear stages, like you go from stage 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, but they're experiences that I think we could all identify with. And one of them is, the first one is the voracious consumption of information, right? That first, when you first find out what's happening, you want to take it all in. You can't believe it. You can't believe what you've heard. You can't believe what you saw. And you want to just watch every documentary and read every book. I mean, when I was, for me, there were very few documentaries when I first became vegan, but there were some. And I watched everything I could, read everything I could, and so on. And then you've got the stages of regret, of remorse. How could I not have known this sooner? Right? How could I have been part of this? What's that?
Anger at the world, being mad at society.
And then anger comes as well. But one of the things that also comes is, so I talk about coming out, and there's this passion, like you want to share with the world what you have learned. And so we do that with everything we're passionate about. When we hear about a new band or a new movie or a new, or even a new person we meet, maybe we fall in love with, or just a friend, right? We want to share them with the other people in our lives, and or share whatever we're passionate about. And so there's this like, right? When we're first vegan and we just don't know what to say, we're just like, and sometimes people go, whoa, like, okay,
too much.
That's a little too much. And so you start kind of figuring that out. And so I very quickly realized the blah doesn't work. Like if my goal, if my aim is to help people think differently and change the way they're thinking and change the way they're behaving, the usually comes with, judgment and how could you, and don't you know, and why aren't you, and right. And so I realized very quickly that doesn't work, that it has to be more of a stance of like, hey, got some information. Yeah. I mean, like, here it is. Do with it what you want, so that it's most effective for them, but it's also effective for me. So I love the interactions, but in the beginning, of course, I couldn't believe the things I heard. And I'm saying this because this is a journey, the whole, like, becoming vegan is a journey, but being vegan is a journey as well. And I just want to let people know that if you are in that stage of either anger, and that doesn't mean that you like get out of anger and everything's fine. It means that, this is, you can go in and out of these stages. You can go in and out of these experiences. The point is they do change if you let them. If you're not attached to what one stage means over another. And I can talk more about that, but I couldn't believe when I was first hearing people's defensiveness and the arguments, right? I couldn't believe it, but that shaped my advocacy, because when I heard people asking questions like, the cows are going to take over the world if we stop eating them. I mean, of course it's ridiculous, but I'm like, okay, there's a nugget under there that's true for someone. People are asking this because there's something in there that's real for them, and I want to be able to respond to that. So with every challenge, with every frustrating conversation or defensive reaction I had from others, it made me a better advocate. That's right. So the root of the word animal is anima, and it literally it means soul, but even more than that, it refers to the animating aspect of all living beings, right? And so so the irony is that we degrade other animals and demean other animals and deny our own animalness. And yet the word animal comes from the word that means that which moves us as living beings, our soul and our essence of who we are. And so I just happen, sometimes it's inconvenient, but I just think it's really important to talk about us as other animals, as human animals and non-human animals. And I realize that non-human is still a negative, it's still like human still in there. Right.
Yeah.
But right. But that's, again, the language isn't perfect, and we do the best we can. So how we talk about animals, how we talk about ourselves as animals, how we talk about other animals and the words we use and the expressions we use, I think is really important. Now, I am not someone I'm not prescriptive about it. I would never tell someone don't use these words or only use these words and say this and don't say that. I think that's the wrong way to go about it. But I think when we reflect upon the expressions we use and the language we use, we are aware that there's a consequence, that words have meaning and that language has consequences, then I think then we are very naturally inclined to speak mindfully and thoughtfully so that we can still be heard and we can still be effective and we can still be clear, but not use language that is especially violent against animals. I approach every person I talk to, and obviously we're talking about non-vegans. I mean, not vegans as well. I mean, I do this with vegans as well, but I really do believe people are compassionate and good. And part of the reason people say, don't show me, don't tell me, I don't want to know. Part of the reason people, say, I don't want to look, is because they're so afraid that if they look, they're going to be compelled to make a change. Like they know that their hearts will lead them in that direction. And to me, it's not that they're afraid of the compassion. It's that they're afraid of the unknown. They don't know what it's going to look like. They don't know what it's going to mean for their relationships and for their identity. They don't know what it's going to mean when they, travel or eat out or have holidays with family members. They don't know what it's going to look like. And it's the fear of the change and it's the fear of the unknown, I think, that stops people. But the other reason people, I really do believe that they're good and kind, and they believe that too. And that's also one of the reasons that people have to couch violent behavior in positive ways. That's why we have to reframe what we do that's negative in a positive way, because we can't, how do you manage knowing that you're a compassionate person, believing that you're a compassionate person? And as I said, I was a compassionate person before I was vegan, right? How do you navigate, I'm a compassionate person, I'm a good person, I wouldn't hurt anybody, with, well, animals are being killed, and by virtue of killing them, there's probably some harm involved. Like, I have a suspicion that there's some harm involved. So there's this cognitive dissonance. So how do you reconcile that? You reconcile that by either changing your behavior and not eating animals, right? Becoming vegetarian, becoming vegan, or you change your thinking about your behavior. And so you have to change the way you think about your behavior, because we have to believe we're good people. And so that is kind of like how I go into every situation, is like, what's their belief system? This is what they believe about themselves. And what am I doing coming into their space? And how are they going to react? Like, why are they reacting to me this way? And this is why. You said before, I think it was Thomas who said that, you said you internalized, like, how do you don't internalize it. It's not about you. It's not, it's something to take personally. When someone reacts defensively or just says, I don't want to know, that's their own fear. It's their own, I think it's their compassion. So that's what I would say. I mean, I'm not answering the question about what I would say to people who aren't vegan. I would say, is it working for you? And is it really a reflection of the values you say you have? And I do believe you're already compassionate. So is your behavior reflecting that compassion? And that's what I would say. And I think, again, if most people are honest with themselves and don't try to reframe it in all of the ways we say, but they sacrificed themselves and they want to die, and really just be honest with yourself and ask yourself the question, is what I'm doing reflecting what I care about? There are so many people on the fence, and they know they're on the fence because they say, don't tell me. And to me, it's a reflection of their compassion rather than a reflection of their indifference that makes them say, don't tell me. Because if you just say that one thing, I know it's going to just tip me over. And so what do we say as advocates back? I get it. I know. I understand. I was there too. I had no idea what this was going to look like. And then I discovered X, right? So we can reflect back, be mirrors to them, because that's all we are to each other anyway. Totally. Well, and I also have to talk about it in the context of advocacy, because I can't help it. Because I think vegans are also really guilty of making vegan food seem different, because we overuse the word vegan so much. I mean, even to each other, it's like, how many of your vegan friends tell you that they had a great vegan meal last night, or a great vegan donut, or a great vegan I know you're vegan, so you don't have to say it with everything. And I've joked that I've done that with my husband too. He'll come home with a product and I'll be like, really, it's vegan? He goes, yes, we're vegan. So it's vegan. Why?
Vegan ice cream.
Vegan ice cream is vegan, right? Just what should we say? Vegan banana? It's vegan because it's a plant food. So let's just stop overusing the word vegan. So that's always been my goal from the very beginning. Teaching, I had no background in the culinary arts. I didn't go to school for it. It started at that church again. I started teaching cooking classes because people said, okay, I get it. I read this literature. I don't want to eat animals. Now what do I do? Now what do I make? Now what do I eat? And so I was like, okay, I guess I'll teach cooking classes and create recipes. I had to. I just, and I did like cooking, and I did know more than they did. I mean, that's what I always say to people. If you just know a little bit more than the person who's coming to you, that's all you need. And so I knew enough, and I've obviously learned a lot more since then. But my goal has always been to take vegan out of the box called vegan and help them recognize that it's food that they already know, that they already love, that they're already familiar with, they already eat, but don't call vegan. So we need to stop calling it vegan. It's fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds and beans and mushrooms and grains and herbs and spices. It's food. Right?
It's just food.
It's just food. And so that's why I'm so glad David's not calling his right. Now, we have successful businesses and restaurants that have vegan in the name. That's not to say that it's not going to work. But so that's what I've always wanted to do. And so my recipes, either in my cookbooks and that are also in the classes I teach, they're just recognizable, familiar ingredients that I help them put together and make things that are familiar, because it's not about the animal products. And I say this all the time, and advocates can use this, and we need to talk about this when we talk to non-vegans, is it's not about the animal products. It's about fat, salt, flavor, texture, and familiarity. That's what it's about. And so when someone says, I'm really craving a burger, I would say, no, you're not. And they might get their little, panties in a bunch, but I know you're not craving, you're probably craving salt, or you're probably craving fat. And I would say that to them, and they'd go, that's a really good point. I love watching them
unravel.
Yes. And then if they want all the credit for it, take it. I don't need it. Just
I came to that conclusion myself.
Exactly. I love that. And that's what people do. And that's why I see what I do as an advocate. I'm a conduit. I'm not here to convert. And they can feel it, because look at the difference between, do you know what you're doing? Do you understand what you're doing? And yeah, man, I get it. I did it too. And here's what, and they lean into me. Right. And so that's the dynamic. And then they figure it out, and I see their wheels turn. We've all seen that, right? We see their wheels turn. That's the stuff I love so much. The Joyful Vegan. I mean, I can't say enough about this book because I wrote it for you. I wrote it specifically for all of us who have got, have had our own awakening, are experiencing the same things. And so I have chapters on this. The angry vegan chapter is really about, saying, okay, here's why we're angry. It's not to say that you shouldn't be angry, but here's what attachment to anger does to us. In that chapter, is it that chapter? I talk about, I don't like the term compassion fatigue. It's used a lot in mental health, right? It's compassion fatigue, meaning that you are overwhelmed by suffering such that you become burnt out. And I don't like the terminology because it makes it sound like you're fatigued by compassion. And I don't believe it's compassion that fatigues us. I believe it's compassion that heals us. But there's another phrase that a lot of experts are using, and I prefer it, and it's empathic distress. It's empathic distress. So it's being so attuned to suffering that you then suffer. And so what I talk about a lot is certainly doing things that, that feed you, right? We have to take care of ourselves, but also being mindful that, we don't want to be martyrs. That, I think there is a tendency among activists, and not just animal activists, to believe that if we're not suffering, then we don't care enough. And if we're not martyrs to the cause, that we are letting the animals down and that we are not working hard enough, and we think we have to suffer to prove how much we care. And I think it's a detriment, because I often say the animals don't need us to be in distress. They need us to transcend our distress so we can end theirs. That's what we are. We have to work on our own resiliency and our own self-compassion so that we can be not only better people, but better advocates for animals. So what are those strategies? I mean, I talk about them in the book. It's whatever feeds you. Don't stare. I think, one of the chapters is on bearing witness. We absolutely have to bear witness. That's why I do what I do and did what I did, and why so many do what they do. But looking is different than staring. So if you think you have to just dwell on how bad things are for animals, that's a mistake. We have to look, we have to be accountable, we have to be responsible, we have to be able to tell their stories, but we need to then stop staring and channel that in a way that's going to help them, and then do something that's also healing for us. So that's it in a nutshell, but the Joyful Vegan breaks a lot of that stuff down. That's so easy for me because it's always just been about compassion. And it's one of the reasons I again, talking about this word vegan, I talk about how I didn't become vegan, because, right, what do you become when you become vegan, right? Yeah. And so it's more of a deepening. And so for me, it's not that I became something new. It's that I deepened what was already inside of me. But more than that, I didn't become vegan as much as I removed the blocks to the compassion that was already inside of me. So all of those blocks that I mentioned that come from society, that come from families, that come from our own fears, those are the things that keep us willfully blind. Those are the things that keep us conditionally compassionate. And so for me, becoming vegan was removing those blocks. And oh my God, what a liberation. Right? You don't have to make excuses anymore. You don't have to justify anymore. You can just be. Now there's pain in that too, because those blocks are protective, right? So there's the pain, but you know what? Life is suffering. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, that's part of, and I don't mean suffering in the sense of the toxicity and the trauma. I mean, it's feeling. Suffering is feeling. And so that doesn't mean, so in becoming vegan, I felt for the first time a consistency in between my thinking and my values and my behavior, and also a relaxing and a liberation, so that I can actually feel sad, but also know that I'm not contributing to it. And that is the best feeling in the world. So for me, being vegan is a manifestation of my compassion. And that is what I will have to say because it's what drives me crazy about vegans. It's what drives me crazy about vegan activists I see. They talk about vegan like it's the goal. The goal is not vegan. It's not about wearing a badge that says vegan. The goal is compassion, and vegan is the way to get there. And when you reframe it that way, then you can relax a little bit about this being an imperfect world. Because it's not perfect. It won't be perfect. So then you can go, like, okay, I can eat peanut butter that was made on a, machine that had also used, milk or whatever. Like, that's not what being vegan is about. It's about doing the best we can to reflect our compassion.
Colleen, what can I even say? It's been so good to talk to you. Your advocacy is unbelievable. The comments I have on here from people who are watching are just blown away. So
All love.
It's all love and all good. And I just want to thank you for giving up your time. And you've been nothing but accommodating since I first contacted you. And it's been absolutely brilliant to have you come on and listen to you. And hopefully you'll get loads more followers in Ireland, because I am always telling people, please listen to this lady. She is so, so good.
Thank you.
Do you want to say anything before we go?
I mean, you are what you say you are, the joyful vegan, and it's an absolute pleasure to hear you and to share with you and to learn. So thank you so much, and thanks everybody for watching the show.
Yeah,
well, I have to thank you. Thank you. So you're stepping so self-effacing. I didn't give up my time. It was a pleasure to talk to both of you. I love talking about this, and I love all of us talking so that we can be better for the animals. We can be better people for each other. That's what this is about. And the more we have conversations and talk and spread that, I think the better we're going to be and the better the animals are going to be. So this was not a sacrifice talking to you. It was an absolute pleasure, and I really appreciate that you asked me and invited me. And thank you to everybody who's watching.